When the Trump-Zelensky meeting blew up in the Oval Office, Douglas Murray wasn't watching it from a comfortable studio. He was watching it from a Ukrainian dugout at the front line, sitting next to the man the meeting was actually about. And what he said afterwards is not what his usual audience expected to hear. And that's exactly why it's worth listening to. Because buried in this conversation is one distinction that explains the entire conversation: the difference between the realm of war and the realm of peace.
What did you think of the blow up between Zelensky and Trump as you're sitting there in the dugout?
Well, it is. It was a very disturbing place to watch it from. Perhaps anywhere would have been. And I mean, obviously, it was a meeting that shouldn't have happened. It was far too early. The thing that struck me was I said to some of the soldiers I was with, what do you make of this? And one of them just said to me, well, we're advised not to follow too closely the ins and outs of the politics of this, and but of course everyone has Instagram or scrolls, and among dog pictures and the hot women or whatever is what happened in the Oval. And but what struck me was this same guy saying, I've got a job to do.
Right. And there's a clarity and a wisdom to that.
Notice what just happened. Douglas was asked for a hot take on the biggest political story of the month. And Murray doesn't start with Trump, and he doesn't start with Zelensky. He starts with the soldier who simply says, I've got a job to do. And that's not an accident, it's his whole method. Because before he judges the theater, he establishes what the theater is actually about. Keep that soldier in mind, because he's the measuring stick for everything that follows.
That moment, because that was a real opportunity to come together and make progress on peace, right?
I don't think by any account it was a successful step forward, unless to some extent it was play but from DC to say to Putin, look, we duffed off Zelensky and, now give us something. But I think it was just one of those extremely, just awful political moments. It was only a week after the Trump comments about Zelensky being a dictator. And people in the administration implying that Ukraine has started the war. And I think that must be, for Zelensky, a pretty Alice in Wonderland situation to be in. And I had significant sympathy for him in finding it bewildering, because it would be bewildering.
Watch the first 3 seconds of that answer again. Lex frames the meeting as a real opportunity for peace, and Murray refuses that frame before he says anything else, not by any account. And that's a habit worth stealing. Never answer a question until you've checked what it assumes. And then he names the inversion at the heart of this whole episode. Within 1 week, Washington had relocated the word dictator from the man who invaded to the man who was invaded. Alice in Wonderland is the polite term for it.
The problem with that interaction, as I saw it, was that that guy asked that, disrespectful question. And I think it was disrespectful. And I'll very quickly say why. I mean, I think that when a man comes from the realm of war into the realm of peace, the people in the realm of peace should have some respect, or at least concession, that the other man has come from the realm of war. And that if you're sitting in a political environment where you talk about people being destroyed and decimated and defenestrated and much more, to a man for whom none of that is metaphorical, I think that's extremely hard to accept. Zelensky is being disrespected by being asked about what he's wearing, when, as everyone knows, Churchill during World War II used to wear his fatigues on foreign visits. And it's just that, it's to remind people that you're coming from the realm of war. And I think that probably in that moment, one of the things that would have been going through his head would be, but I mean, if this was Putin sitting here being assaulted by a journalist, you'd hope your host stepped in and defended you. But I think it was just petty and threw things off in a bad way.
There it is. That's the sentence the entire discussion hangs on. And notice that Murray never argues that the suit question was rude. Etiquette is a weak defense, anyone can shrug it off. He changes the register entirely. In Washington, destroyed and decimated are figures of speech. In Kiev, they're just a regular Tuesday. And then he runs the test that does the real work, the symmetry test. Swap Zelensky for Putin. Would that journalist ever ask Putin about his appearance? And you already know the answer, and the fact that you know it tells you that the question was never really about a suit. When you want to know whether treatment is fair, swap the subject and see if it survives. It almost never does.
But it's an example of the frivolity of a lot of the attempts to understand what's going on. I mean, my view is that since actually most people, in fact everybody, cannot be an expert on everything, one of the things that we always do is to seize on minor and really quite unimportant things. I mean, every side does it. Look at the way in which the American right for years talked about the Churchill bust leaving the White House Oval Office in the Obama years. I didn't want to hear another darn thing about the Churchill bust after 8 years, because it was in lieu of trying to understand and actually critique Obama's foreign policy. It was just an easy shorthand.
Note whose sin he reaches for as the example, not the left's, the right's. 8 years of Churchill bust discourse instead of an actual critique of Obama's foreign policy. He's indicting his own side's habit, and that's precisely what buys him the credibility for what he says next. Because next he explains why half the internet turned on Ukraine.
The politics in the United States is so dumb that at the very beginning, it could just be reduced to, well, the left went Putin bad, Zelensky good, rah, rah, Ukrainian flags. Therefore, the right must go the opposite.
The necessity of people who live too long online to try to wade their way out of the memes. It is so like that, isn't it? Because yes, I mean, I can understand the people who find it very irritating that so many people who would put BLM flags or pride flags or trans flags in their bio, then put Ukrainian flags in their bio, despite almost certainly not knowing where Ukraine was. And if that happens, the inevitable instinct of a lot of people who aren't really thinking is to say, that's really annoying. These people are really annoying. I'll sock it to them. But that's where you've got to try to rise above that and say, actually, funnily enough, the fate of a country doesn't depend on my tolerance for memes online today.
That is the most honest explanation you will hear of why parts of the right turned against Ukraine. And notice it isn't a geopolitical explanation at all, it's a psychological one. Aesthetic irritation dressed up as foreign policy realism. The flag people annoyed you, so you took the other side of a war. Murray's point cuts in both directions, and this is what makes it valuable. You are allowed to find the flag and bio crowd insufferable and still recognize who invaded whom. Those are two separate judgments. The moment you let one decide the other, the memes are doing your thinking for you.
There's this whole energy of entitlement that he brought. He forgot that there's a new guy. You gotta convince the new guy that this global mission that this nation is on, this war that is in many ways the West versus the East, that there's ideals, there's whole histories here, that this is a war worth winning. You have to convince them, right?
Yeah, no, sure. And they obviously failed on that occasion. But as I say, it must be bewildering to have landed in a place where people were seriously talking about Ukraine starting the war,
right,
and Zelensky, not Putin, being the dictator.
Watch the shape of that reply because it's a masterclass in 3 words. Sure, but back. He concedes the small point instantly. It costs him nothing. Zelensky played the room badly? Fine, granted. And then he walks the conversation straight back to the thing the small point was quietly replacing. Who is the aggressor? Lex keeps steering towards Zelensky's manners. Murray keeps returning to Putin's tanks. In any argument, the person who controls what the conversation is about wins it, and Murray never once lets go of that.
I think that people can be lithe enough to be able to recognize that, you can make criticisms of Zelensky or the Ukrainians, but it doesn't mean you have to fall full Putin. And again, unfortunately, a lot of people in our time don't have that capability.
A lot of people in our time don't have that capability. That's the real subject of this conversation. Not Trump, not Zelensky, not even the war. It's the capability Murray keeps demonstrating without ever naming, holding two judgments at once. You can criticize an ally without adopting the aggressor. You can be irritated by a cause's supporters without abandoning the cause. You can concede a point and keep the argument. It sounds like nothing. It's the rarest skill in modern politics, and once you start looking for it, you'll notice almost nobody has it.